steam-driven machines can roll along mile after mile doing agricultural things. So as we said before, European farmers are suffering from competition, and most of the migration then will be rural to urban. As we talked about, there's also urban to urban, and there is still rural to rural. I don't think we need to look too closely at this. Is just, again, to beat the dead horse. Wheat prices are falling, and wheat production is rising. But I do want to point out here that there is migration to rural areas. In this period of the 1880s, the Great Plains are being settled. Remember, the railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, and before there's a railroad, you just don't want to bother to farm in places like South Dakota. These are places where you can grow wheat, but wheat is not economical to transport by wagon, and the river system is way inadequate. So you need trains. Trains going. I remember the way the railroads were financed. The railroad companies actually own big swaths of land near the tracks. So not only is the railroad necessary, but the railroad also encourages migration to these areas. What the colors on this map show are the percentage of males who are foreign born in 1890. And I wanted to point out that these red dots are places where counties where between 23 and 74% of the population are foreign born. And I want you to notice that there are lots of these northern plains, the kind of, what is this, yellow-green color, is 10 to 23%. They're still very substantial immigrant populations. As you can see, the South is very blue. Immigrants are still not coming to the South. Now, many urban areas are very small counties, so they're hard to see. You kind of see in Ohio up along the edge of Lake Erie, where the urban area, there's some urban areas here that are in red. These are very lots of immigrants in that area. If we could zoom in on this map, you'd see obviously in New York and other places too. But it's also true that on the plains we have large numbers of counties where there are large proportions of immigrants. But the key thing still to remember, while this is important, it's particularly important to the Native American population, because this is still all the way to 1876, by the way, is the year of Custer's last stand. So there's still some Indian conflict even into the late 19th century. But these are still not large numbers of people. These are still very sparsely populated areas. So there's a lot of red there, but there's not so many people. It's still happening. People are going there. From the point of view of a Western county, immigration is a big deal. From the point of view of the nation, immigration to Western counties is not such a big deal. There are not that many people in the scheme of immigration. Yes, they are coming from mainly Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as Northern Europe. You're quite right. Of course, the Scandinavians are still coming, and this is certainly where they're settling. But it's not exclusively Northern and Eastern. There are definitely Czechs and Bohemians out here as well. Yeah. Oh, they're not states yet in 1890. I guess I'm a little surprised about Oklahoma, but these don't become states until the 20th century. They're still organized as territories, so the census wasn't completed. Okay, so again, we're not going to talk much about the rural migration, but it's an interesting phenomenon. That it's interesting to note that this area, the last of the frontier in the continental United States, is in fact full of immigrants, and that's an interesting perhaps sideline to our story. The real story, let's get the real story is this one. This is 1876, so this is the same year as Custer meets his end. Big steam engines arrive. Again, steam has been around, but this is on display at the Centennial exhibit in Chicago in 1876, and it's a coreless steam engine. It's a new kind, a new design of steam engine. And the story here is the scale. This thing is big. It produces a tremendous amount of power. So you're not limited anymore. Once you build your factories around steam, you're not limited to how fast the river turns. Right? Prior to steam, we're using water wheels. Okay? And there are some big water wheels, but you can line these things up next to each other. You can have as much power as you can shovel coal. So your only limitation now on the size and also on the location is how fast the train can roll in with coal. Right? So this allows for bigger factories, and it allows factories to be located in cities, which is economical because that's usually where the railroad tracks come together. So to summarize the difference between the early and the later 19th century, the earlier and later, let's call this the first phase in the early 19th century and the second phase of the Industrial Revolution. What we can see in the later phase is that things gain momentum, change direction, and they kind of become self-propelled. In the early 19th century, Americans are usually using, quote, borrowed technology from England. They use the word borrowed to mean stolen. Patent systems aren't so well enforced, but a lot of this is done by it's stealing. Anyway, they use water, and they had to locate near streams. And even though processes are becoming more organized, we're still talking about a lot of artisans in workshops. And we're producing goods that displace home-produced goods. Those are like shoes and clothing, textiles, and cigars in San Francisco. Apparently a whole lot of cigars out west. The big change in the 19th century is that science finally starts to pay off. Right? I talked a lot about science all the way back to the 1600s. But it's not, in the 1800s, things are starting to work. Science has developed to a point where it can actually help make things. An example being the Bessemer process. We'll talk about. Henry Bessemer is I'm not sure where he's trained. He's a chemist. He's not a tinkerer. There are certainly tinkerers in this era too. The Wright brothers are bicycle mechanics. Figure out how to make an airplane. They're not using a slide rule. But Bessemer's a chemist. He knows his chemistry. He knows that he has a reason for wanting to blow air through molten iron to make steel. And Carnegie and Rockefeller, these guys know enough to hire people who do those kinds of things. The use of steam, electricity, and unskilled labor, all of this together means increased scale. Right? If you want to scale up your factory, you have to rely on unskilled labor. You can't rely on the small number on a slow process of apprenticeship or education. If you want to double your factory size tomorrow, you got to be able to hire anybody to do it. Right? And the final thing, the stuff they're starting to make now, instead of things that we're selling to individual consumers, now they're making heavy industrial goods, making rails for railroads and different kinds of rails for skyscrapers, beams and rails and things like that. These are things that are used for other capitalist enterprises. You see there's a self-reinforcing aspect to that. Right? This is a Bessemer converter I mentioned. And this, again, this is not the kind of thing, you can see there's a little person here standing here. This is huge. The scale of, that the Bessemer process only operates at huge scale, and it's not the kind of thing you figure out how to do in your garage. Right? Not made by a bicycle mechanic. This is the Edgar, inside of the Edgar Thomson works. The Edgar Thomson factory was opened by Carnegie, named after the CEO of a railroad company, to flatter him into buying the rails that this produces. But it opened in 1875, and it produced in its first year of operation more steel than the entire city of Pittsburgh had produced the year before. Right? So one factory, more steel than all of Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, more steel in one day than all of Pittsburgh had produced in a year. So it's a massive undertaking, and one that's the scale change here should remind us, I think, of the internet, of where this year's server is frequently twice as powerful as last year's and costs half as much. The kinds of increase in productivity in steel, at least in this period, are really tremendous. And the fact that this steel, that it can turn out this much steel, but that this steel is then consumed by people building railroads and building skyscrapers, tells us that more things are happening. Cities are growing, and indeed the cities are growing at in remarkable pace. Let's see if more on city growth shortly. I have some statistics on that are amazing. But there's also, as there always is, a downside. In order to achieve this scale, you must have less skilled labor, and that's going to mean children. So if you could see this picture that I can look at here, you'd see that everybody in this picture, all of these workers, are young children. This was taken in Fall River, Massachusetts, which is a town with a very large immigrant majority at this time. So it's a safe bet that these are immigrant kids. They may have been born in the U.S. or born abroad, but they're very likely to be children of immigrants. And so Alexander Hamilton is getting his wish that child labor in the U.S. is a happening thing at the end of the 19th century. Let's see. Again, I mentioned these incredibly astronomical figures. What happens between 1860 and 1910 here, so we have a 50-year period. The value of total manufacturing output rises by a factor of 10.8, whereas the labor force by a factor of 5.8. Right? So what that means, combined with even ignoring all the other numbers on this table, that alone means that labor efficiency is rising. We define efficiency as the amount of stuff you can make per unit of input. And we'll look only at labor. That tells us something important, because if you make a few Econ 1-like assumptions, an increase in productivity has to lead to an increase in wages. Right? So over this period, we see output in the U.S. growing astronomically. In some industries, unbelievably fast. We should see an inexorable rise in wages, because the productivity of labor is rising. Right? And surprise, there is. Yes? Yep. Yes, it's employed. It is numbers of people employed, labor force. Yes, yeah, it is labor productivity. Well, it's unskilled. We're talking about unskilled labor. Yeah, it did. Let's say it probably would have increased faster if they had only employed adults. I mean, or if there were enough adults to employ. Over the time, this is real hourly wages in manufacturing. So it's sort of an average idea of how much laborers make. And stringing these two different data sources together, the trend is certainly up. Right? Implying the rise in income of workers is pretty significant over the centuries, less than a century, 1860 to 1930. We're looking at something that's almost rises by maybe a factor of 3. If you're looking at it optimistically, 2.5 maybe. That's pretty decent. All right? And okay. But even though they were making more money, they still had to live with dead horses in the street. All those rails, all those beams went to building ever larger cities, and the pace of city growth was absolutely unbelievable. New York grew between 1880 and 1920. New York tripled in size. Chicago grew by 400%. Detroit by 700%, and Los Angeles by over 1,000%. And it's between Los Angeles had only 50,000 people in 1890, and by 1930 it had 500,000. You don't get that kind of growth without some casualties. And in this era, before the automobile is dominant, horses are a big part of the transportation system. And if you think cars are dirty, that's worse. Horses would. I just have a picture of it. It's not that the big problem with cities were horses. There are lots of problems in this age before modern sewage. But I think if you squint at this picture, you can smell it. Cities must have stunk, and kids must not have cared. In England, where the data is better, the life expectancy in cities during this period is consistently significantly below that of the countryside. Yet nonetheless, city and country life expectancy is rising throughout the 19th century. So again, people are getting better off. There's no doubt. But at the same time, conditions in these urban areas during this period of rapid growth and rapid immigration are nasty. The other nasty business is income inequality. And I want to put this out here now because we're going to look at this slide again. As you can see, this slide starts in 1913. So really most of our lecture is taking place over here. But we have every reason to believe that those high numbers at 18%, and what this is the proportion of income received by the top 1% of income earners. And in this period of the Gilded Age here, the early 20th century, looking at numbers around 18%. That, again, is a high concentration of wealth. So we saw increases in earnings of workers, right? Remember that? It's going up. But at the same time, the capitalists are getting richer much faster. And the real income disparity is a real big feature of this age. And as we'll see, it's also a feature of our current our current age. If we extended this graph another decade, we would see that number rising back up to 18%. So today we now have similar income disparities as in the Gilded Age, and one may argue, if our class lasts long enough, we will discuss whether immigration has something to do with that or not. Okay. All right, so here's a conclusion, but most important, remember Walker. Please take a look at Francis Walker's piece. Think about Jefferson. Think also about the demographic transition. All right, and I have lab 1 and midterm 1 if you still haven't collected those. Thank you.